When I think back to Lost Vikings, probably the first thing that comes to mind for me is the graphics, the vibrant, colorful graphics. I think because it was a Nintendo game, and if you think about the other console games at the time, things like Sonic the Hedgehog or Super Mario, they were so vibrantly neon colored. We went that direction too, and so the colors really pop when I think about, in my mind's eye, what Lost Vikings was.
A lot of people ask me about why Blizzard's art style is so vibrant, why the colors are so rich and all that stuff. And they always, I love listening to their theories about how the theories that come up actually really make me laugh.
One of the things that Alan wanted to do was make the artists work under poor light conditions. What that meant was, you had to draw under these fluorescent lights, and so everything had to be really bright and cartoony in order to show up under those lighting conditions.
In all honesty, we sat and we would do the artwork. Sam and I would work on the artwork, and then we show it to Alan. Because Alan was colorblind, he wouldn't be able to see the difference between some colors. So he'd go, "Can you bring the colors up a little more so that I can see them?" And he just kept saying that. So we would bring them up, he would see them, he'd approve them, then we'd bring them back down for the game, and then we go on. And then one day we just left them up, and that's all there was to it. No magic. It wasn't that we suffered for our art or anything like that. It was just that Alan was colorblind and you need to be able to see it.
When you look at the art style of Blizzard, obviously it became really refined in a lot of the later games, but it started out because we had a mixture of people who were like fresh game industry artists who hadn't done anything before, like Sam Didier, who had worked at a movie theater before coming to Blizzard, was like really talented artists on paper, but hadn't had any computer experience. We're all sort of teaching each other and learning each other's styles, and gradually it just evolved that they had a lot of similar elements they wanted to convey, like sense of power in some of the heroes and villains. And they just started drawing stuff and fed off each other, and it turned out to be a great style.
So one of the interesting things about the business of making games back then, or the art of making games back then, was teams were so much smaller. Today teams are 200, 300 and up. Back then you could make a game start to finish in just a few months with 4 or 5 people.
That could all hear each other. If one of us sneezed, the person furthest away would say Gesundheit. Right now, if you wanted to go from one corner of Blizzard to the other corner of Blizzard, just here in Irvine, how long do I think it would take? It would probably take a minute to walk across the first quad, and then you gotta wait for the light, and then you have to cross a street, and then you have to walk through the second quad, and that's gonna take you maybe a 4-minute walk at least to go from one corner of Blizzard to the other corner of Blizzard. 4 minutes.
Yeah, when I run into old school folks at the company, it usually brings back some good memories.
I think that most of the things that we did back at Silicon and Synapse were a team effort that all of us pitched in, and all of us fed off each other, and all of us came up with some really good ideas to solve problems that had come before us, both artistically and program-wise.
We had a lot of ideas for things we could accomplish back in the old Super Nintendo and Genesis days, and we just couldn't get funding for it. We were a young game company, we didn't have a lot of credibility yet, and so lots of people talked to us, but nobody wanted to give us the money. Which I still think was surprising because, we were the first American team to release a game on Super Nintendo. The first 10 titles, 9 of them were Japanese, and 1 Silicon and Synapse game. So I felt like they should have given us a shot, and we could have done some amazing stuff.
I think the biggest problems that we had to solve were mostly financial. Because though we made some really good Nintendo games, and we were doing ports as fast as we could in order to keep the doors open, there were times when money was very scarce.
Blizzard didn't pay very much at the time, so the way that I made more money was I was working at home in my spare time doing a conversion of Blackthorn from Super Nintendo to PC, as well as being the lead on Warcraft during the day. So it was insane the number of hours that I was working to try and accomplish both those projects to make literally just a few $1,000s more. We really suffered in the early years of Blizzard.
Mike and Alan, to their credit, would go and cash they found out that they could go to the local store and cash in their American Express cards for cash, and then take that cash and put it in their bank account so that they could pay us when times got low while they were waiting for royalty checks to come in. So I think that that was one of the reasons, even though we didn't know at the time, we knew that there were some struggles going on.
And the next thing you know, everybody loves the games, and you're making another and another, and you're 30 years later, and People are getting the retro package where you can play them again and love them. It's not something I ever would have expected. So I don't even know how to react to finding out that 30 years later, people are still loving the work and playing the work. It's gratifying. I'm honored that people love this stuff so much.
You know, I'm really heartened by the success that Blizzard has had over the years. It was so exciting to be able to do games and then that players loved and would keep playing for years. And so it's really cool that Blizzard is now on its 30th anniversary. I only worked there for about the first 9 years, but the company just continued from success to success, and it's now something that everybody knows about. If it's one of the top game companies in the world that people can name, it's Blizzard.
Back in the early days, before we were known, there was one sort of standout moment for me when I knew kind of our games were going to become popular. And it was, I forget exactly who I was talking to, but I'd flown up to Nintendo and had a meeting up at Nintendo, and I remember the producer I was talking with there saying that the president of Nintendo America had mentioned to him that the only 2 games not made by Nintendo that he had played to completion were Lost Vikings and Blackthorn. And so that was a pretty amazing moment. And, not that the president of Nintendo was necessarily a fan, but for me, that was a watershed moment to hear that the president of this storied company knew who we were, was playing our games, and loved them enough to play them all the way through.